Hello, not-so-neighborinos. Angie B here again, and today's blog topic is the Beatles, in large part because my darling Hannah Banana wanted to hear me vlog about the Beatles, and because today is a pretty gloomy day for me, and this is basically my only break all day, and to try to cheer myself up, I decided what better way than to think and talk about the Beatles, which are pretty much just, plaid and rainbows and sunshine personified. I've always loved the Beatles because, in large part, I was raised to love the Beatles. My mom grew up with the Beatles, okay? She remembers watching the Ed Sullivan Show on their very first American TV appearance. She was one of those people that was screaming and crying every time she saw them on TV. She had friends that were in the fan clubs. She remembers when John Lennon died and having a party in his memory, and my mom just grew up loving the Beatles, and so she raised me to love the Beatles. She used to sing me Blackbird while I was still in my cradle, and we would used to clean the house together while listening to her old LPs. And because my mom was a Paul fangirl, she raised me to be a Paul fangirl. I've always loved Paul. I loved him when he was on The Simpsons. I've loved all of his solo stuff. I've loved him in the movies the best. But now that I'm a little bit older, and now that I'm thinking for myself a little bit more, I have to say I can't pick a favorite of the Beatles. Because all four of them are just so amazing, okay? They've all got their awesome qualities. I love Ringo because he's goofy, and he always got the short end of the stick in all of the movies. And also, I have a real weakness for guys with big noses, so I just think Ringo's adorable. In fact, I still think he's adorable. I love John because even though he was probably an asshole sometimes, especially to Paul and the other bandmates, he was amazing when it came to writing and performing music. And yeah, I know Yoko kind of broke the group up and everything, but he really seemed to love her, and he really seemed to, find some sort of greater purpose when he was with her. And I just have to applaud someone who used their fame to bring attention to world issues and to speak on behalf of peace and love. So I have to give credit to John Lennon because I love him too. I love George because, as Hannah and Sharon like to say, George is probably the nicest of the Beatles, and he's the one that's always kind of just pushed to the side and forgotten. Of the four, he's probably the least known, and he's probably the one that has the least amount of fangirls. So I have to love George because he's adorable, he's cute, he was a great songwriter too, and I remember when George died, and that was a sad day for me. And then I have to still love Paul McCartney because I've loved all of his solo work. I even loved the stuff he did with Wings. I think he's adorable, and I just, great musician, great singer, and I still love watching him in all the movies. Speaking of the movies, Help is probably my favorite of the Beatles movies. Granted, it's been several years since I saw Yellow Submarine, but I really love Help. I actually wrote a really in-depth review for Film Flammers on it, so if you haven't read that review yet, go check it out, okay, because I wax very eloquent about why I love Help so much. But just to touch on it here, I love Help because it's got some great music in it, and because it's got one of the most goofy, inspired, ridiculous, crazy plots of any movie ever. Only the Beatles would have a globe-trotting adventure movie that had them being chased by a crazy Indian cult. And I just love it because it's slapstick, and it's goofy, and it's just meant to be fun, and, they're not taking themselves seriously at all in this movie. And that's something I love about the Beatles, is that, yes, they made serious music, and they took stands on serious world issues, and they really revolutionized rock and roll and the music industry and what it was to be, famous. But I also love them because they didn't take themselves seriously. They were more than willing to mock themselves and to do goofy movies and things like that. And that's what I love about them, is that they're so multi-layered. They were willing to make goofy movies like Help because they knew that it would entertain people, because they were entertainers. And yet they also made some of the most amazing music, some of the most inspiring music that has touched so many different generations and so many different people across the world. And I love them because while they were only together a relatively short time, when you compare them to rock groups like the Rolling Stones or Aerosmith, They made such solid, amazing music, okay? Every single one of their albums has at least 4, if not more, fantastic, simply fantastic songs on it. I loved their fashion, I loved their style, I loved their panache, I loved how they just went from being cute little boy banders that appealed to really young girls to really serious, you know, respected artists in the industry. And I love them because they wrote their own music, they played their own music, they, you know, just, they were so amazing. And you don't get a lot of musical bands like that anymore. You don't get a lot of rock bands that do everything and then make amazing, funny movies and speak out on world issues. And it's just, when I think about how today's rock and roll is all about, like, Jonas Brothers and, you know, bubblegum pop and stuff like that, it just makes me so nostalgic for an age when you could have a band like the Beatles that were just so amazing. I love the Beatles. I always will love the Beatles. If I ever got a tattoo that had anything to do with a musical group, it would be the Beatles. Because they're a band that's timeless. They're not a fad. They're not a trend. They're a band that'll be here for hundreds of years, if I'm any judge of music. And I just love the Beatles because they're the embodiment of happy memories for me and of a time that's gone past where music was really solid and really good. And I love their movies, and I love them as people, and that's my love of the Beatles. If I had to pick a favorite song, which is really, really hard to do, I mean, if you like the Beatles, you know what I'm talking about. I love Blackbird because of the sentimental reasons. I love Let It Be because of the message. I love Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds because it's so trippy and, you know, creative. But I have to say my favorite Beatles song, if I had to pick one, is Rocky Raccoon. And I know that's probably ridiculous to some people and confusing to others, but I love Rocky Raccoon because it's goofy and it's their take on, you know, rockabilly, and it's just got a funny story to it, and I love the twanginess of it. I just love Rocky Raccoon. If you've never heard Rocky Raccoon, which, I mean, it's kind of one of their lesser known songs, go find it on YouTube and listen to it, because it's a really good song. So that's the vlog for today. Hope you've enjoyed. And to all the Beatles fans out there, peace.